Hello and welcome to Tokyo Inklings. My name is CY. You can find me on my website at tokyostationpens.com, on Instagram and TikTok at tokyostationpens, and on Twitter at tokyostationmnh.
And my name is Jacob. I'm Food Fan on Instagram and on Twitter, and have a blog at foodfan.com.
Hello, my name is Khuê, and I'm Admiral Cat on Instagram.
Hi, I'm Alesa, and I'm Inky Rocks on just about everything.
And this is episode 60. Thanks a lot. Obviously, we've got 4 people on the podcast today, so really exciting episode I believe we're going to have. We actually had a completely different show notes just a few days ago. But yeah, it's gonna be an exciting one, I think. Before we head into the podcast, just to remind everybody, I think we did it last time as well. We do have an Instagram account also at Tokyo Inklings, where we post a preview about each episode. So do give that a follow, give us a shout, and share with your friends. All right, so now going right into the episode, because I think we're a bit short on time and loaded on topics. I want to start the episode by talking about some of the events that have been happening, that are going to happen. And I think it's really like gearing up, because we've had quite a slow spring for fountain pens, but it's finally gearing up to be a pretty exciting summer, I think. Last weekend, I went up to Karuizawa to see Style Art. And pre-COVID, they used to have this option where you could go out to Karuizawa to the station, and you can have them pick you up and drive you to their workshop. So you kind of have this like experience of get to the station, somebody drive you out, and I was like, oh yeah, drive out. Couldn't we just like take a bus there or something? Turns out the answer is no, because it's literally up in the mountains. You're like, don't know where you're going, and I went with a different friend who could drive us up there, but we got there, and of course Kazuno-san was super friendly, gave us a kind of tour of his workshop. And I don't want to dwell too much on this, but one thing that I did get a sense of is just how excited he is to talk about fountain pens to different people, because he's been stuck up in the mountains for now almost 3 years, right, without anybody really to communicate to. So he's really wanting to go back out to overseas shows like SF as well, and he previewed to me the new pen that he's going to release. I don't think it has a name yet, but this pen takes the nib of the custom urushi. So that's the size 30 18K nib. It's a very well regarded nib. But if you know anything about Style Art's business model, they take pens, they buy the pens, and then they take the nibs off of those pens. And what he told me was that with the plastic pens, he didn't feel very bad about just chucking away the plastic pen bodies. However, given that the custom urushi is a very nice pen, it's got lacquer application on it, and a lot of people love the custom urushi already. So he said he was kind of thinking, oh, what do I do with this body? Because it would be, in his words, mottainai, or a waste, and just throw away the body. And so he came up with a solution where he said he's going to make a section for the custom urushi that fits pilot size 15 nibs, and he's going to give them as an omake, or a present, to people who buy this new custom urushi size wooden pen that he makes. So essentially, you're getting 2 pens for the price of 1. And I thought it was really interesting the way that they came to this conclusion. But yeah, the pens do look really nice.
But still, I agree, it's a strange choice to use the custom urushi for the lower end pens, or if you can call it 742, 743 a lower end. But for those pens, you're mostly paying for the nib, and the rest is just plastic, right? For custom urushi, you're paying for high quality urushi over ebonite, I think, right?
I think it's ebonite and ebonite lining
Yeah.
or something like that.
So what I wonder is why custom erosion? I mean, if he wants larger nibs, why wouldn't he just go and get like Jova or Bock number 8 size nibs? Wouldn't that be more cheaper? I don't know.
Yeah, so he used to use Bach nibs actually in his very first pens, and we got to see some of the first things that he created. And it's quite interesting how he got into pens. Hopefully one day we can maybe interview him. But the key is the quality of the nibs, I think. With the Bach nibs, he found that he was, trying to tune them, to adjust them. But with Pilot, things just work. So, Uragiranai Pilot. That's
And I also remember, maybe we talked about that before, but I remember many years ago I saw Style Art for the first time at some event at Staya in Daikanyama. It was maybe like 5 years ago now. And at that time, they sold pens with nibs from Platinum and Sailor and Pilot. And they, at one point, I think fairly recently, he stopped selling pens with Sailor nibs and Platinum nibs, and it's only Pilot. And I think he said, if I remember correctly, at Tips that it was a quality difference.
I mean, that seems to make a lot of sense to me. Pilot does just have superior quality. They're just better nibs and for better prices, to be honest. So that was a stellar visit. I also learned a lot of other stuff from, mainly talking about urushi and stuff. We'll get into that a little bit later. But it was definitely a fun trip. I definitely suggest, if people are interested at all in wooden handmade pens, to go up and to see him. And, his tolerances are fantastic. And he's a really friendly, chatty guy. So definitely, I'd recommend it.
One little side note, and maybe this is only applied to like 5 of our listeners, but if you are in Japan, as we talked about last year, I think there is this program where you can pay your income tax and your residence tax to a city in a countryside, basically, and you get a gift in return. And one of the participating areas is Karizawa. So if you pay a certain amount of your income tax to Karizawa, you can get a style art pen, and in the end you end up just paying effectively 2,000 yen. So you can get a style art pen for effectively 2,000 yen.
Mita Club used to do the same too.
Yeah, they do the same too.
Mm-hmm. And you got your first drill log, right?
Yeah, I got my drill log that way for effectively 2,000 yen. Well, you are prepaying, so I mean you could argue that you're losing out on potential interest, but effectively the cost is 2,000 yen.
Yeah. The second topic that we have is actually something we should have probably talked about a few weeks ago, but Eagle-Eyed Jacob had noticed and put out on Twitter that Sailor's, or rather Plus's acquisition of Sailor is now complete. Yeah,
so we've covered this topic extensively a while now, but just to quickly recap, so back in, I think, 2020, in July 2020, Sailor issued convertible bonds that Plus bought. And as we said back then, convertible bonds are basically bonds with a stock option attached to it. So you could either hold the bond to maturity and get coupons and your principal back, or you can, within a so-called conversion period, convert it to equity. And in the case of this convertible bond, the conversion period, it began about 1 year after it was issued, which is why Plus for the first year couldn't convert even if they wanted to. But then on top of that, I think as we mentioned before, in one of the disclosure documents, it said that the agreement in principle was that Plus would not convert until Sailor's both business divisions, both the stationary division and the robotics division, would be profitable for a whole financial year. And as we said a few episodes back, that actually happened last financial year. So that condition was met. So in last month, Plus finally converted. So now the CB is gone, and now Plus has roughly 58% of Sailor's outstanding shares, making them the majority shareholder.
Yeah, so technically this is not an acquisition, they're just the majority shareholder. But effectively, if Plus wanted a certain direction, that would just be met, right? Just by the numbers.
Yeah, but they are in charge, and they now call Sailor Kogaisha, right? That's the relation now. But they also say that they will let Sailor be independently managed, at least for now. So we'll see what happens.
I've heard that story before, but I'm from Hong Kong, so. All right. Jokes aside, actually, one thing that we noted before was that Sailor's robotic division seemed to be profitable while the pens were suffering, right? And we've obviously seen a lot of price increases. And I think my kind of take on this is, price increases kind of suck. Sailor needs to probably be more efficient in actually the manufacturing. But, the numbers don't lie. They price increased. They are profitable now. Is that the only reason? Probably not. But from the executive's perspectives, that's probably a huge contributing factor, right? And Sailor was underpricing some of their pens previously. So I think the trade-off is, have price increase, but have Sailor exist, or not have the price increase and not have Sailor exist. I'd rather a world in which Sailor does exist. I don't have to buy all of their pens.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think the price increases were the only factor. I think another one was Sailor's lineup was so confusing originally, and not only did he have so many pens with effectively the same, it's different name and same model, but also they were mostly like standard models, right? I think one thing we've seen for the last 2 years is the focus away from like a standard lineup toward more and more like special edition, limited editions. Like fewer and fewer people probably buy the black and gold, the burgundy pens. More and more people buy this month's special edition.
Although I have to say, right after we said that, they came out with the Prophet Light, the Prophet Casual, and all of these like random models. But when I was talking with Stellart, he seemed to think that actually the robotics division was the one that was causing them trouble. Now, Stellart has been in the industry for a long time, so I'm guessing they have, contacts within Sailor. And so that's really the first that I've heard, which frames the relationship between the robotics and the pens division in that way.
I haven't looked back that many years. It's maybe possible that in the past the robotics division was not doing well. But what we know during the pandemic is that the robotics division did well because they supplied robots to a company that made syringes for vaccines. So they profited actually a lot from the pandemic.
Right. Yeah, well, that makes sense.
What do you think about the change of the logo?
We discussed this quite a while back. I don't mind the change of the logo. I think the previous one is better. I don't mind the change of the logo that much. What I do mind is that they changed the design of the nib, but they didn't change it fully. So it's like a halfway between what it used to be and then they have this new logo. So they removed the words 1911 above the anchor, but they kept this fancy scroll work. So I understand if they want to, move it to a more simple design, all for that. But the way it is right now, it's kind of this, how should I say it? Have you ever watched that Dan Brown book that got turned into a movie?
Yeah, Da Vinci? No.
Yeah, the Da Vinci Code. And the Parisian officer asks the main character, "What do you think about the Louvre?" And the guy's like, "Oh crap, what do I say?" He says, "I think it's nice." And the guy says, the police officer says, "Oh, it's a scar on the face of Paris." Right? It's kind of like that to me. But the Louvre, you don't say it's ugly, right? Because it's not ugly. But it just doesn't match. It doesn't match the rest of the design. So I think I would like them to iterate on this again.
In another 100 years or so.
Yeah, hopefully before that. Yeah, so we've got another exciting event that's not happened, but will happen in a couple of weeks, right? And that's Ink, Ink, Ink. I won't be going to Ink, 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 but I think some people among this group are.
Of course.
What do you think about its return after 2 years?
I think it's going to sell out because I tried to get tickets and I had to get backup emails. I've got 100 emails in my inbox now with people canceling, and then I go and try to fill and get that ticket and it's already taken, and then someone else cancels, and I think it's going to be long awaited. And I think particularly for the Japanese, because I don't know if you remember, the Ink, Ink, Ink was more of
foreigners.
Yeah,
yes,
foreign
exactly.
inks. They weren't like all the local specialty inks. So you can get like Pelican and European inks and stuff. So
Or the Philippines one that's very difficult to get.
And stuff like that. So yeah, I think it's going to be gangbusters.
Formula looks better this time because, as you said, back the earlier Ink, Ink, Ink events, there was most like standard inks as well. There weren't so many like special editions, right? It was, the Ultramentis and Pelican and stuff you could buy any day mostly. Mm-hmm. There were a few like kind of rare ones. I remember, I think they launched like Sailor ink on Ink, Ink, Ink. But compared to the Inkunuma event, mm-hmm. it was kind of boring in that sense. It was just ink you can buy.
I managed to buy a basket full of ink, so I don't know.
Right, but by comparison, at the Inkunuma event, mm-hmm. you could finally buy all of those inks that you normally have to go like to Tottori and Hokkaido mm-hmm. and wherever for, right? But I think this year's Itoya Ink, Ink, Ink is a little bit different because they seem to have gathered all kinds of like either new releases or event
Special
exclusives. Yeah. I saw, for example, there were 2 or 3 new tag inks that I think they are announcing now for the first time at this.
But we're also 3 years further along in the Inkunuma, so everybody's ink crazy now. Yeah. So.
And I guess we were expecting it to come back, as they already made this event like some weeks ago. The Ink Itoya, was it in Shinjuku? Itoya Shinjuku.
Ah, yes.
I think none of us could go. It was on a weekend, and it was kind of like, they lost one of the ink in the name, but they do it in a small scale in one of their smaller Itoya. So it was kind of a warm-up for the comeback of the big Ginza Itoya.
But it's just run really well, and it's run so that, you can bring your own ink book in and just test all the inks, not even buy anything. And it's just an elegant venue, and they've got it set up really well. They've got, all the water changing out and everything. It's just very well run. At least the last one was. So I think it's going to be a big hit. And it's very different, I think, from the normal ink shows where you can actually test. Like I said, you could test all the inks, bring your own ink book, and test all the inks and not buy anything if you want to, which I think a lot of people will do.
And they usually bring, like set up. They give you one deep pen, and they set up clean water, and they change it all the time. So you just go deep, try, and then clean your pen very fastly, which is very nice.
But you almost have to be blind not to see that there's an ink trend in Japan for the past almost 5 years now. At the 2020 Ink Ink Ink, they came out with I think the first series of the Nezu line. And I don't understand why they had to stop it for the last 2 years, given that everybody else continued their ink events with great success. If anything, the Ink Numa has gone even deeper, right, in the past 2 years. I feel like they kind of wasted 2 years, and I don't think it's a matter of negotiating contracts, because Mitsukoshi, when Stationary Station Stars opened, they had an ink event too with all the regional inks.
But you have to subscribe, and it was like 3% at a time, and you have 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Remember, yeah. I did it, so it was more like private. You have like maybe 10 slots, and you were in the middle in a small area where there was a guy standing there, and you were shopping with Akane, and I was just trying some inks, but it was quite strange as a setup.
But there's nothing stopping them from getting the inks in or changing up the setup, and I do feel like they've wasted some time in having a 2-year lapse where they were effectively not part of the conversation.
I wonder if it has something to do with the venue. If you remember the old Ink, and probably this one as well, it always event space. It's like a second basement floor, probably very bad ventilation down there. It might be the perfect place for a super spreader event, right?
But they had other events down there, right? I mean, in the meantime, they've had
they
like
still keep
planner
their
events.
calendar, their diaries, like earlier end of the year, new journal and diaries even in calendar.
But maybe they're expecting the Inkinuma crowd to be
Crazy.
yeah, exactly.
I'll be there, so it's crazy.
I guess they wouldn't be wrong
No.
if you're there.
Exactly. No argument here.
And again, jumping onto this ink trend, Jacob, you have several dip pens from a unlikely source.
Well, do you mean the Itsushi? So yeah, I think we talked about them in the last episode, but that was before the product came out. So I think the official release date was the 20th, but a few days before, many retailers started selling it. I think on the 19th, on my way back home I did some weekend work, I stopped by a Marzen and saw they had them in stock, so I bought one of each. The display is very nice. I think that they did a very good job with the display, and you clearly see, we talked about that before the podcast, but you can clearly see, how you're supposed to like dip it in ink, and then you dip it in water, and then it quickly becomes clean and ready to go again, and you dip it in another bottle of ink. So clearly, the selling point is that it's very easy to clean and it's very cheap, right? It's your Inkinuma like entry kit, right? So I think they did a good job with that. I think the product is, I don't know, so the nib is just a standard Pilot. I think some people call them like the super quality nib. So basically exactly the same nib shape as in Kakuno, Prera, and so on. Different stamp, but exactly the same. And I stuck it on either a plastic body or a wooden body. And there's no feed, and according to the packaging, the nib is not removable, and you should not even try because you're going to break it, according to the product description. But you can easily remove it, and I don't know. It doesn't work that well, I think. And the problem is that you dip it and you can write, especially with a medium nib, you can write like 10 characters and then it's dry again. So I understand why they're doing this. I understand why there's a need for an affordable alternative to glass pens.
They want to concurrence with Sailor, right?
Yeah, but I don't think this is it. I also think I've heard similar complaints about Sailor's Hokoro, that you dip it and you write 10 characters and then they dip it again.
So I think the best solution to this is actually Kakimori's glass nib, right? That you can put onto traditional dip pens as well.
Yeah, but the problem is that like with any glass nibs, the production doesn't seem to be able to scale, right?
Right, but clearly they've been able to make metal ones. They're not as good, but a company of Pilot's design department, of their manufacturing capabilities, I think it's not outside the realm of possibility that they could make something a little bit better than what they've given us, considering what they've given us is a holder with a Kakuno nib.
Yeah, I'm sure we're going to see more of these from other manufacturers. I mean, now we've seen Sailor, now we've seen Pilot, so it's your turn, Platinum.
All right, so moving on to the next topic, which is something that we've discussed already quite at length, but I thought it was interesting. This just came out a few days ago, actually, 2 days ago. We've discussed this Narwhal TWSBI thing. I don't know what to call it, but it's, I mean, this year, 2022, this is the year of drama. But TWSBI, just to recap for everybody's sakes, TWSBI had originally in, I think, March, released, or not released, but sent an email to their retailers saying that if they stock Narwhal pens, then TWSBI would no longer do business with them, or Narwhal and Moonman. Okay. And So this obviously got a lot of retailers in a frenzy. Narwhal is a up-and-coming brand. They seem to be fairly popular nowadays. But TWSBI is a huge seller in almost all markets, right? Even here in Japan, they're a huge seller. So we had Frank from Narwhal come onto the podcast, and he said, well, I found out just like everybody else on social media, and nobody has been talking to us. And this was, I'd say, 4 weeks ago, right? 2 days ago, Jacob, I sent you this this statement from TWSBI. Yeah. And then the next day, Narwhal sent pretty much the same statement. But the difference being TWSBI's statement was very much internal and just to the retailers, nothing public facing, while Narwhal have had a joint statement. So the joint statement on Narwhal pens can be found on their Instagram page. I'll just read this TWSBI one so we can comment a little bit about what it says and contrast it to the Narwhal statement. So TWSBI says, Dear retailer, TWSBI is pleased to announce that TWSBI and Narwhal have settled their respective differences and concerns. Under the terms of the settlement, TWSBI acknowledges that Narwhal has not violated any intellectual property rights of TWSBI or any third party. TWSBI's primary concern was Narwhal's use of the piston filler mechanism, which was the subject of U.S. patent number titled Fountain Pen, issued to Theodore Kovacs on March 26, 1929. This patent expired on March 26, 1946. After reaching an understanding on the issue, TWSBI has been convinced that its use of the terms knockoff, unethical, and design infringement concerning the Narwhal pens was unfortunate and retracts those terms. TWSBI and Narwhal agree the piston filler mechanism is available for anyone to use as a result of the expiration of the patent. TWSBI apologizes for any confusion that may have been caused. And then there's a bunch of other stuff. What do you think about this statement?
So I think if TWSBI on their own had just changed their mind and they just thought that they screwed up, I think they would have phrased this very differently. I think they would just have sent an update to the retailer saying that even if you buy Narwhal pens, you can still have a TWSBI, right? To me, the words settlement, this sounds like there's been lawyers involved and this is an out-of-court settlement, and on the condition that TWSBI admits that they screwed up. Right? But the caveat here is that I don't know anything about law other than what I've seen on the TV show Suits, so take this with a big grain of salt. But that's my interpretation.
Yeah, good thing I studied law and took the LSAT. But a lot of people have been concerned with TWSBI's original statement saying, oh, isn't that illegal? Isn't that anti-competitive? And that's definitively not the case. It's not illegal to have conditions that you want the retailers to meet in order to sell your product. So, for example, you cannot sell malt products unless they have their own dedicated display in a physical retail shop. So it's not illegal for Malt Blanc to say, I won't sell to you because you only have an online presence. And conditions like this are made all the time. It would be impossible to have a Gucci store next to Adidas, even though they're having collaboration right now. And it would be impossible to have a Louis Vuitton store next to, ABC Mart, for example. This would just not happen because the manufacturers will have conditions upon which the retailers have to meet in order to supply their products. So this is not new.
And just to precise, ABC Mart is a sneaker, like a...
Yeah, it's like Foot Locker. There would be no legal case since TWSBI wasn't suing Narwhal, right? So there's no legal case in in this anti-competitive measure. Do I think it's wrong? Yes. But is it legal? No.
But how do you know that, for example, Narwhal hasn't sued TWSBI?
So that's, I think, where it gets interesting. If you look at what's been retracted, I'm going to read this again. TWSBI has been convinced that its use of the term knockoffs, unethical, and design infringement concerning Narwhal fountain pens was unfortunate and retracts those terms. This is not an apology for what TWSBI has said about Narwhal. If it were, the statement would read, TWSBI apologizes for the unfortunate use of these terms and therefore retracts them. TWSBI is not happy about this statement. The legal case that can be made is a defamation case, which we just lived through a very high-profile defamation case recently. So it would have been theoretically acceptable for TWSBI to just say, given that there are design similarities, we decide to stop supplying pens to retailers who carry Narwhal. That would have been 100% fine. It's the way that TWSBI went about doing this, which allowed, I think, Narwhal to gain the upper hand in these negotiations. So funnily enough, TWSBI, I believe, looking at the situation, looking at the statement, have actually shot themselves in the foot. If they had just been quiet about it, they would have been able to do what they wanted to do.
But I listened to the episode when you interview Frank, and what I didn't get is like, how did it start? Because the patent is already, not out to date, but like
it's expired.
Expired. So anyone can use it, except if you made a new patent with a new.
Well, TWSBI knew this. TWSBI knows this. They're not stupid people, right? And in 2009 on Fountain Pen Network, they were asked about if they had a new patent, and at that time, Speedy, the president, or the owner rather, said, no, there are no new patents. It's a free-for-all because the patent expired a long time ago. So TWSBI is doing this deliberately, right? In my view, I don't know. I don't live in their heads, but reading the facts that are available, reading the comments that they have made throughout the years, it seems like a 100% anti-competitive mindset. So we don't have to. I think that the question of did TWSBI know about the patent? Did they not know about the patent? I don't think that's actually relevant because it's been settled in what they've already said many years ago in the past.
But it's like, why do they?
So why do they start this? I think they just see a low cost piston filling pen that poses a threat to their market share, and they don't like it.
If there's no lawsuit, if there's no real pressure for them, why would they go so far as to retract the statements rather than just quietly change the policy?
So this looks like Narwhal threatened to sue them.
Right.
As you said, right? So this looks like Narwhal threatened to sue them, and TWSBI says, okay, we f***ed up. They consulted their own lawyers. The lawyers said, you guys f***ed up. Oh, I'm not supposed to say that. You guys fubbed up.
I just think they thought they were big enough and they could bully people. I mean, they're big and Narwhal's small, and a lot of the retailers are very small. They live, month to month, keeping their stock up. So I think they tried the bullying thing and it didn't work.
And there's actually precedent for this in game theory. So this is you are operating under the assumption that every actor here is rational, but there's a strong reason for why market monopolies would act irrationally in order to defend their market interests. So, for example, if somebody else tried to get in on like the Amazon game, right? Amazon is not afraid to spend money to cut the competitor as long as it means that they remain the dominant market share. So this has precedent in other business areas. It's not new, but TWSBI overestimated their size, I think, and their market sway.
And just the bad image they came across, you know. I mean, it wasn't like Narwhal was copying anything. They didn't really have a leg to stand. They didn't have a leg to stand on. So I think they're big. You know, TWSBI's a darling of the inexpensive pen world, and they ought to be. They're very good, but you know, they're not so good where they can act that way, and people are going to think it's okay. So I think their public image just got hurt a little bit, and that's why they backed down.
Yeah, I think their public image got hurt a lot. But I think given that, this statement is still quite tone deaf, because this doesn't apologize for anything. It says TWSBI apologizes for any confusion that may have been caused. There was no confusion that was caused. Nobody was confused. The original wording was clear enough, right? I mean, yeah, it's like, well, I'm sorry that you guys got, you know, butthurt, but that's the way it is. So, anything else on this TWSBI drama?
Only that we hope it's over now.
Yeah, I hope it's over, because I like both, and I like both pens, and I'd like to be able to buy them both.
So, interestingly, TWSBI's statement kind of ends with, out of an abundance of caution for the avoidance of doubt, TWSBI remains ready, willing, and able to supply your business with TWSBI products, even though you may carry competing products, subject to the policies and procedures of TWSBI. As such policies and procedures may be modified from time to time at the sole discretion of TWSBI. So, yeah, I hope this is over, but, you know, time will tell. Now, there's a second piece of drama.
The drama of 2022.
So the TWSBI stuff, TWSBI Narwhal stuff, we actually didn't plan on talking about today. But this is the drama we did talk about, obviously, because I had y'all preview this post, and that's about Wancher. Have you guys? Okay, so let's roll back a bit, give a little context. I think people who've been in fountain pens long enough have constantly heard these rumors about Wancher. Specifically, they sound shady, they're doing too good to be true things. Even the retailers that we talk to, specifically we talked to somebody who's very closely associated with the Tokyo International Pen Show about Wancher. Said, hey, Wancher's not at the Tokyo International Pen Show. And they said, yeah, but we heard about them and we don't want to work with them. So there's a negative perception of Wancher, but at the same time, they supply pretty interesting and unique products, or at least they did. I think Wancher was really one of the first to do all of these super colorful, super glittery sailors that were easily accessible to the Western market. But yeah, they've always been kind of shady. And Jacob, you and I have discussed this since forever, right? We've talked about this for a long time.
All of us here have heard all various stories about Wancher, but it's hard to tell what's just rumors and conjectures, and it's very hard to find any sort of conclusive evidence. And on top of that, there's no single thing, I think, that Wancher has done, presumably done, that is so noteworthy or outrageous that it alone is worth talking about. Instead, it's the sum of the many small things that sort of leads to bad taste. And now you have done extensive research and connected all the dots.
So the difficulty of Wancher is that nothing they've done is technically illegal, right? I mean, there's one little part which I think is illegal, but otherwise, nothing they've done is so outrageously illegal that, you know, people need to clamp down on this. But I released, so I did this research. I spent 2 years researching Wancher and their branch companies, and I don't really have a conclusion. I don't have an agenda to conclude, oh, Wancher is this or Wancher is that. But clearly they have some shady businesses. Let me highlight a few things so that we can talk about them on this podcast. The first is their Dream Pen campaign. The Kickstarter campaign, super, super popular. Probably one of the most well-funded pen Kickstarters ever to exist in the history of Kickstarter. They seem to imply that this pen was, made in Japan. You have Urushi pens at incredible prices. I think it's starting at like $300 or something like that. It's absolutely incredible prices. This is the starting price of a sailor nowadays, right? And turns out that these pens are not only not manufactured in Japan, there's actually some false marketing going on. So that's one. The second is their tenuous connection with Pensachi, and how Pensachi is almost like another front for Wancher to funnel their low-moving inventory out of Japan. And then finally, I would say their connection to Pen Wing Stationery and this fake makie stuff that really is only bought up by the Western market, because turns out their quote-unquote makie are really sticker flakes they can buy on Amazon for about 700 yen. So these three, I think, main topics, let's talk about them. Jacob, have you all read the article, by the way? What do you think about this? We'll go in order. What do you think about this Kickstarter thing? Because you backed it.
Yeah, I backed it.
So you got one?
I got one. I eventually sold it, but that has nothing to do with Wancher. That's just me selling pens all the time. What I recall was that it was a seemingly well-run campaign, and I didn't have any complaint as such. But what I remember, which was one of the early things that kind of surprised me, was that they, at one point, they didn't have enough gold nibs. So they were supposed to, you could choose to get a pen with a gold nib, and that would be a Jobo gold nib. But they didn't have enough of those Jobo gold nibs, which, stuff happens. But then at the same time, they announced that they have come up with their own nibs. And the exact phrase was, with collaboration with fountain pen masters and nib masters in Osaka, Japan, the place of origin of many Japanese fountain pen companies throughout history, we have been researching about the specialty and features of vintage Japanese fountain pen nibs, especially nibs with ebonite feed. They are not outright saying that their new nibs are made in Japan. They are implying it. If you now go and read various reviews, I see, in one review here, someone says, Wancher's nibs are in-house nibs made in Osaka, and another reviewer saying that this is an in-house nib, and like most Japanese nibs, it's finer than corresponding Western nibs. I think this is Wancher's shtick, that they never say outright that the products are made in Japan. They are implying that, while in fact, as we know, most of the products are not. We know for a fact that the Shizuku glass pen is not made in Japan. We know for a fact that the eyedropper pens are not made in Japan. We know for a fact that some of the Urushi is not made in Japan. But the product descriptions, they imply that without going all the way to say that. And then the reviewers and bloggers draw that conclusion, and then that it becomes the truth.
So one of the interesting things which you talk about is this reviewer ecosystem that they've built up with a lot of huge reviews, right? Like Fanatic, for example. Mm-hmm. And by the way, I sent Brad the article before publishing it. But, on the Fanatic blog, he reviewed the Dream Pen, the Dream Urushi, True Urushi, whatever it's called. He says, when I think of Japanese and Urushi, dollar signs come into my head, and that this True Urushi pen is a more affordable, way to get Japanese, like to get this. And, there's no this specific part is not in the Kickstarter campaign, but the Kickstarter campaign links to that review, and there's no effort on Wancher's part to really correct it and say, hey, it's not actually made in Japan. One of the product videos actually has a voiceover saying that the lacquer was done by masters in Wajima, and this was the only time that they mentioned in the Kickstarter anything about specifically having Wajima craftspeople perform lacquer on the pen. But in an interview that they gave to receive funding to create this pen to a government affiliated financial organization or finance organization, they actually say that the ebonite is from Japan, and then it's sent off to Taiwan to make into a body. And then at the same time, we send these pens to Vietnam to have lacquer application done in Vietnam. And look, Vietnam has long culture with lacquer as well. So I don't think it's an issue of, Vietnamese lacquer versus Japanese lacquer versus Chinese lacquer versus Korean lacquer. I think, each has their own style, and it's different. It's different. But the obsession to make it seem like it's made in Japan is just kind of dirty. And then something else that I was speaking to Stellar about was urushi, because Stellar has urushi pens for sale. And so they told me, when they go up to Wajima, there's this, you can't just go up to a craftsperson and be like, hey, can you lacquer my pens? You actually have to go through an entire studio, and there's a studio master who controls everything. And not only that, each craftspeople, they don't work like Bakmondo, right? Like Bakmondo can do, from start to finish. But these craftspeople just do one aspect. There's a craftsperson who only does polishing, right? Can you imagine? Your entire life is dedicated on just polishing the pen. So, when they say, Wajima craftspeople, it would just be impossible for Wajima craftspeople to do this, because that's just not their business model. This is not how the lacquer industry works there. And so it's great that they have Kickstarter backer updates about, visiting Wajima. But I do think there would be nothing wrong with these pens if they were forthright about what they are. But I think in an attempt to elevate the perceived value, they've gone and deliberately muddled the facts and turned things into hearsay that, it's made in Japan, and then, then it's not them who said it. They're kind of like Facebook in that way, right?
I guess this kind of fishy when they sell something who is not they play with the word and a lot of adjective it's like buying fake, Gucci bags, on an Italian market, when you don't know anything about fashion industry and luxury, and you're a bit naive, and people say, it's really cheap, it's like 50 euros or something. You're like, oh, nice, I never found a bag like this. But sometimes, of course, it's the customer responsibility to look behind it. But when you are, I guess people trust a lot what's come from Japan. Like,
there's a brand.
Yeah, so they're just like, oh, it's from Japan, so it's made in Japan. You make this natural connection without thinking, the price is quite cheap. Maybe something is not that transparent behind.
Well, I'll give you an example, right? They were selling the Dream Pens for about $300. I recently commissioned a studio in Wajima to do lacquer on one of my 149s. For the base black lacquer, that costs $200. So let's assume you can make the ebonite pen for $50, which you probably can't. But let's assume you can. What kind of margins are you making on this pen? By the way, Kickstarter takes 30% of your profits. So it would just make zero financial sense to offer this. It's impossible just on a numerical level. But second thing I want to talk about is their connection with Pensacci. And we actually mentioned Pensacci once on this podcast. Actually, it's the first time we had Khuê, you on the podcast. You mentioned Pensacci. What did you think when you were reading this article about Pensacci? Were there things that kind of, I guess, were revealed to the surface?
I don't know why, but from the beginning, I was following the account, and something seems not really, how to say, normal. I don't know. It was maybe the way they try to sell it, the picture, and sometimes they put like limited edition, and I saw that they buy some pen, like a lot of people buy some pen from the stationery shop, limited edition we cannot get easily outside of Japan, and they resell it with the profit, of course, because they took the time to go there and buy it. But Pensacci usually resell it with a very, very big margin.
You mean discount?
Sorry?
You mean discount or?
It depends on the models. Like the Pentonode one, they like almost double the price of the limited edition. Yeah. And other, they make like kind of cheap, like a discount. And some people contact me, some of the followers, like, what do you think of Pensacci? And it's like, seriously, I never order from them. I follow what they post, like by curiosity. But we got this discussion about their fake limited edition sometimes. And for me, it was like, it's not really honest, and because when you're outside Japan and you don't know what's going on, which shop release limited edition, you see a new pen, new colors, and you just buy it because you get in the trap because you never see this combination of colors and stuff, and they are just mixing part of pen together for the sailor, for example. And I don't know, it was a little bit don't want to go too close.
There's a reason you guys have me on this podcast, because I usually tend to disagree with everybody, and I'm going to go ahead and disagree with you guys very strongly. I totally see what you're saying, and I totally think that we probably need people like you to kind of keep people on the straight and narrow. But you guys are talking from a very privileged position. You're talking about pens that normally cost like $1,000, and to tell you the truth, anything over $50 is an expensive pen for the vast majority of the collectors. I've bought from Pensacci before, even when I was in Japan. I bought the Hawaiian Ripe because they made a pen I like. There's three things. How much does it cost? Does it write well? Does it look pretty? And it met all those. So it doesn't mean that necessarily what they're offering is a bad thing. If they're lying about it, sure. But in the end, many people can't afford an urushi pen or an ebonite pen. And they're offering something that people can maybe get a little taste of. That they just can't afford the $700 for the cheapest Nakaya. So I think, and then even like the parts bin sailors that they put out, supposedly a special edition. Well, how is it any different than Sailor putting together a parts bin pen? So I think it's important to point out some stuff to keep them on the straight and narrow and not outright lie. But on the other hand, the vast majority of people just don't have the access we do. If you don't buy it through Pensacci, who are you going to buy it through? Who are you going to be able to get other than, another reseller or a second hand? If you wanted to get any of these pens, and if I could have a nickel for every time somebody came on a DM and asked me to buy them a pen, I'd be rich. Because everybody wants these pens, it's just not offered. So they are filling some sort of void. And for many people, to tell someone that their, parts bin sailor is somehow not the real thing is a little bit elitist, I think.
So I agree with you. And I don't think there's anything wrong with, moving slow moving models.
Well, it's obviously not slow moving if they're able to sell it.
Well, it's slow moving on Wancher's site at the Wancher price, but then if you move it to Pensacci, move it to a lower price or a more affordable price.
Exactly.
And get
exactly.
It out.
So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like slow moving. It's they priced it too high.
Well, I mean, it's slow moving at the original price. Right?
Yeah, they priced it too high. Yeah.
I agree with you that there's a place for a company like Pensacci to exist. what I think is strange is how they're not forthright with that connection. So about 4 years ago.
But why do they need to be? Why do they need to be? I mean, there's just a lot of companies that if you go and buy anything off of a grocery store, ConAgra probably owns it. You don't know that till you read the really fine print, and maybe not. You might have to go to their website. So is there a reason they need to show that connection? I think, like I said, you guys are like kind of on the case of just this one company that is probably the only light at the end of the tunnel for many people in the West to be able to get an Asian pen. This is why you've had me on the podcast. Because I lived in Hawaii and I lived in the States, and you could see stuff on Instagram, but you just couldn't get it. And Pensacci offered some chance to get it.
Sure.
You know?
I agree with the fact that it's bring access to some pen that, like you said, the Hawaiian one. But I disagree with the fact when they try to sell something who is not, who is a lie, like for the Dream Pen, like you have to. I guess when you maybe it's too naive, but I don't appreciate the fact that people will fall in thinking they buy a made in Urushi pen for $300.
I totally agree with that, but it's the same thing. I can't buy a Lamborghini for $10,000, and it doesn't matter how much a company says this is a Lamborghini. You buy a Lamborghini for $10,000, maybe you deserve that car. But I'm not saying that's a case, and certainly his article and what you guys' opinion is certainly right that we need to keep them on the straight and narrow so they're not outright lying. But apparently they're very good marketers. It's really hard to pin down that lie.
There's one more thing here, which I think you mentioned in the article. We have in the past asked retailers in Japan, why don't you sell overseas, including your own special editions? And the answer we got from the retailers was that even if it's special edition, as long as it has, Sailors or Pilots' own logo on it, you cannot sell it overseas. You can only sell it overseas if it's your, like Pentanote or a bomb box or whatever. So I'm not saying that this is the case here, but it's possible that because Wancher's sailor pens have sailor logos, have sailor nibs and so on, it's possible that they are not themselves allowed to sell these sailor pens overseas directly. And it's obvious that there's a connection between Wancher and Pensacci. We don't know the nature of the connection, but we know that the DHL contract is the same. We know from LinkedIn people are working for both companies.
PayPal is the same.
Yeah.
Invoices are the same.
We don't know the nature of the connection, but there is a connection. So it seems plausible that Wancher is using Pensacci to sidestep that limitation that they cannot sell their own sailor pens overseas.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure they are. And what that does is probably not something illegal. It's probably something against the actual being able to retail something. So, like I said, when they do their parts bins, special Pensacci, 18 different colors parts bin pen, it's not really a sailor pen, but it is made of sailor parts or whatever. So, yeah, I think we're talking about they are walking that really fine line. They're not doing anything illegal. And it's probably really important to watch that and let people know. And like you were talking about the stickers on the Urushi, that's pretty crappy, And so they shouldn't be doing that. You call them out on it, But because I think a lot of people don't understand that. But to tell you the truth, if I could not afford a Maki-E pen, and somebody gave me a sticker thing and they told me it was stickers, but I thought it was pretty, I would want to buy it. As long as they tell you. And that's what I said. That's the problem. That's the problem.
They don't tell
But they don't actually come out and say it. You've found a couple instances where they might have let it slide. So they're just really smart about it. And that's just something that, it's probably good to tell your subscribers that you need to be on the watch for this. That's definitely true. But I don't think necessarily it's in any way saying that they don't fill something within the fountain pen market or that they should be like shunned or banished or whatever, because I think they fill a real need.
No. The thing is that I think they have to be transparent, and they are not.
And it'd be nice. It'd be nice if TWSBI was transparent about what they did. I mean, companies do this. They walk a fine line to try to get a competitive edge, and when they go across that line, people need to spank them.
At least their pens are transparent.
Yeah, and so you spank them a little bit, and that's that's good, But on the same breath, I like my Hawaiian ripe, and nobody else sold it,
I think they play with that. They release sometime one of their limited edition, like a real one, the one they select the part and the colors. And in between with Pensachi, they mix 2 or 3 pens together and this is another new limited edition, which it's kind of fishy because It is fishy, but it's not illegal. And there are people that want those pens, in particular like me, especially when I'm living in the States and can't get a hold of, pens.
But Alesa, we're not saying that what they're doing is illegal, though. That's the key. They're not
exactly.
Doing
you need to call them out on when they start crossing that line. And I think saying like kind of confusing the whole whether or not it's Wajima Urushi. Yeah, that's kind of crappy. And they need to be called out. But TWSBI kind of crappy did something to Narwhal, and I'm still going to buy TWSBIs. I'm not like keeping myself away from TWSBI. Somebody spanked them, and they got back in line.
So the last thing I think we want to conclude with, just because we're running out of time as well, is this idea of mixing parts together. I don't think that mixing parts together makes it any less of a sailor pen, right? I don't believe that.
Unless you're a collector or something. Like if you're a sailor collector, then you want their actual
and
special
the price,
editions.
Right? They sell it like a limited one.
But the issue is that as a seller selling a product to a consumer, where you deliberately confuse the consumer, you're selling them something that isn't as advertised or isn't as explicitly said, right? Lying is not necessarily outright saying that the sky is green.
Yeah.
But it's deliberately misleading.
Absolutely.
The other party.
But you know what? Precious resin, that's misleading. Precious resin is plastic. It's not mined from the base of Mont Blanc, So is that lying? So, we can sit there and do that philosophical cutting and chopping. But in the end, when they stay on this side of the line, they meet a need. When they start crossing that line, you spank them. What you're doing, which is exactly what we need to do. But that doesn't mean that they shouldn't exist. TWSBI crossed that line. People spanked them. They went back on the other side. And that's exactly what, if you buy from Pensachi or Wancher on that, take a look, read it carefully, make sure that what they're saying is true, ask them questions. If they don't give you a good answer, then don't buy it. But I still think they meet a need. I mean, you're just looking through and people going, it's an ebonite pen. They're super excited to get an ebonite pen for $300. I understand that. I understand that joy. Because, a lot of people just can't shell out $800 for an ebonite pen. What?
Won't you be deceived?
No, but like I said, you buy a Mont Blanc, that's precious resin. Okay, that's plastic.
On the Mont Blanc thing, what I heard is that it's actually a translation, like weirdness from German to English. So I wouldn't put too much stake on the Mont Blanc thing.
But it could be true, it could not be true. Exactly the same thing you're saying about Pensachi. To me, it just flat out, Mont Blanc's nibs are worth it. Their design is worth it. I enjoy writing with them. I'll just put up with their stupid, precious resin thing. I feel silly, but I'll put up with that. But in the end, it's plastic. And, that's just really good, really good marketing can cross over to lying.
So the Urushi stuff is like saying that the Wing Sung plunger, right, is a Pilot 823. That to me is the same. And that's clearly unethical, right? Like we can agree that you don't call a Wing Sung a Pilot, right? Even though they might use the same nibs.
Right. Those are pretty clear.
Right?
Yeah.
To me, the Urushi, the Wajima Urushi versus, Vietnamese Urushi, whatever, that's the same, right? Wing Sungs are not bad pens.
Exactly. And I agree. The Vietnamese lacquer is excellent. But if they call it Wajima, it's a lie.
Right.
They need to be spanked.
The part spin thing is, I'm saying that this is a rare limited edition. This is, again, it's not true. Are these pens nice looking? Yes, I agree. I think the
But they are rare. You can only buy them from Pensachi.
Well, I mean, if that's the
but
case.
if you're like a collector, then you're going to be aware of what Sailor puts out as a special edition. But if you're not a collector, like I said, I own a Hawaiian Ripe. That is not a Sailor edition.
That is one.
But even if it wasn't, I'd still like it. And to me, because I'm not a big Sailor collector where I've got to have only Sailor, approved special editions, I like it. It's worth the money to me, or any other pen that looked like that.
And you got to know about what you're buying. That's the point here.
Oh, I agree. And again, that's cut it close. And when they go across the line, they need to be called out. But that does not invalidate the whole company or their relationship with many, many pen owners.
So the conclusion of the article that I make is exactly actually what you say, right? Am I here to tell you that Wancher's bad? No. I'm not here to tell you that Wancher's bad. I'm not here to say that, that Pensachi shouldn't exist. I am saying that they should be forthright. They should be honest about what they're doing.
But I think a lot of stuff, there's probably the only really thing that you can really nail them for is just calling the Wajima. You saw it somewhere, right? That they were called Wajima.
Yeah, it was on one of their videos. I mean, even the part spin mixing thing, I'm fine with them mixing parts, but you got to be honest.
And then
that.
they can also come out and say it's a Pensachi Special Edition Sailor.
Well, it's not really it's a Pensachi Special. It's not Pensachi Special Edition.
Sure, it is. If your company put it together, it's your special edition. If it's a Pensachi Special Edition. I know we're cutting words here, but man, that's so much of marketing is cutting words.
It is.
And you just got to be aware of which way it falls, which side it falls on.
It is, and I think you've got to. But you've also got to understand that when Pensachi is able to buy products from Wancher, let's say 2 products, mix them together to create their own special editions. First of all, it undercuts other companies, other retailers who are doing it the right way, right? Second of all, it actually also means that they don't have to pay on the special edition pricing that other companies have to follow.
Wait a minute. No, that's other companies getting full up Sailor special editions.
That's right, yeah.
And they cost more. Full ups, a fake Mont Blanc is going to cost you, even if it's made from Mont Blanc parts. If Inky Rock's Mont Blanc comes along, and I put together parts from different Mont Blancs and sell it as Alesa's special edition. Yeah, it should. You're not paying a premium that you would to Mont Blanc, but I'm not calling it a Mont Blanc special edition. I'm calling it an Inky Rock special edition.
Right, but this undercuts the other retailers, and for sure if you did that, I
don't agree with that, because as long as it's the Pensachi special edition, where my problem runs into is where they undercut people is when they buy sailor pens, straight up regular sailor pens, and they sell them, and then people who actually have to pay a premium to carry that pen in the United States because they are actual authorized retailers, that's who they hurt.
But that's literally what's happening with the
the special edition.
It is.
It's a Pensachi special edition.
I get. For me, how I see this Pensachi limited edition is like the stock they couldn't sell.
But that doesn't matter. That's regardless. If you take trash and put gold on it and sell it and people want to buy it, it doesn't matter that it's trash as long as you tell people it's trash.
If it's your product.
If it's your product and it's a Pensachi special edition.
Then if you are a reseller,
exactly. That's who they're called. If they're selling regular sailors that you can normally sell in the United States, and they're selling it at a cheaper price, which Ingaika used to do all the time, if they're doing that, they are hurting the actual retailers. They're not hurting the retailers with these parts bins pens because they don't have those parts bins pens. The retailers in the United States can't sell them. So they're not in any way hurting them. They're not even selling the same product.
Well, the retailers in the United States could mix like maroon parts and black parts and call it, I don't know,
exactly. They should be able to do that. I mean, if you've got a bunch of leftover things, we got a bunch of leftover things here. This is I'm going to say, just use my name so I don't trash anybody else's company. But if I got Inky Rock Special Edition, sailors, because I have a bunch of black pens and a bunch of red pens, and I mix the two, and it's an Inky Rock's Special Edition, people who want black and red pens that are mixed will buy it. Am I hurting any other sailor that's a normal red pen or black pen? No.
Yes, because Sailor would not sell to you.
It doesn't matter. No, Sailor did sell to me. Sailor did sell
but
to me.
But they will not continue that
relationship.
And people want
they don't
that
allow
pen.
you to transfer
But you guys never buy anything from eBay? You never buy like a cheaper platinum?
Not the same. Yeah, but it doesn't change the product. You know what?
The issue is that Sailor wouldn't continue the relationship with a retailer that mixes parts.
Okay, so why is Sailor selling to them?
Because Sailor's
Because
selling
what?
to Wancher, and Wancher's not mixing parts.
Yeah, but
Pensachi's mixing parts.
that's that. You don't think they don't know?
I think they don't know. Yeah.
I don't think so. I think people who buy their pens, and if they find out a retailer is doing something, they may or may not. I think they're particularly rough on retailers that are overseas. Those guys get hammered, and a lot of people buy pens like on eBay and stuff for the exact same pen that you'll find on any online, and they sell it for a lot cheaper on eBay, and that really undercuts the people in the States, but the retailers in the States. But nobody ever seems to complain about that. I'm not saying that lying is lying, and they shouldn't. But other than that, they fill a need, and they fill a need that many, many other people are doing. You go on eBay, and there's a gajillion cheaper 3776s you can get for half the price you would get on any retailer, because they're not going through an authorized retailer. What about those guys?
I'm not sure people realize that Pensachi is just a reseller.
Yeah.
Though.
They may not, and so this is you guys' job to let them know that they are a reseller. But I don't think necessarily this is like the one driving thing that's going to make it where they're like, they don't meet a need. They meet a huge need. And I don't buy from them. I could care less what happens to it. But I just know that when you're outside of Japan, we have this kind of nice rose-tinted glasses. We can get all these pens that we want. We can get all kinds of different things. And people in the States are just seeing stuff over and over on social media. And it's just like, yeah, can't get it. I just see that all the time. And when they do have an opportunity to get something, it's, we got to make sure those guys stay in line, but they do meet a need.
It's where I think they deceive people, because big people save money to get a limited edition from Japan, and they think they're buying it.
But it's not just being elitist. It's not the real limited edition. It's the same thing. It's not the real urushi. They got some sort of, again, you're talking about like just that you can A, afford it, and B, you live here and is able to get it. You're not coming from the same point of view as 90% of the other people that are probably buying from Pensachi.
Yeah, but when I used to live in Switzerland, I tried to get a pen here. Either if I knew someone who helped me, if I cannot buy, okay, I cannot buy it, but I will be deceived if I buy a pen.
But that's the seed if you only want like real urushi. A lot of people just like the way makie looks, and so if it's a sticker, if they know it's a sticker,
you can find some on AliExpress or something
over
for €10, $10 or €10. So what is not nice or let's say honest from them is like they are selling it as a real one or as a,
and that, again, they need to be called out on that. And that's why, so when you guys think I'm like saying that everything you're saying is not true, it is true, but I don't think it's at the emergency level you think it is. That it's one of the many things that are probably wrong with many different parts of resale and buying things online or buying things from another country.
I think that's the whole thing about this Wancher sphere. No individual thing is really big enough to talk about on a podcast. Mm-hmm. It's only the sum of it that makes it look.
It does, but then again, we're sitting here, in this elite position where A, we can afford these things. B, sometimes people want a cheaper, crappier, version of something, a cheaper and crappier version of something that they enjoy and it looks nice and they can afford it and doesn't break the bank. And exactly, when you say they got to know, this is where he needs to call it out. But it does not invalidate their value.
And so let's try to end the spiciest podcast episode that we've ever had.
That's why you guys have me on.
Let's try to end this very spicy episode. I do actually conclude the article with, Wancher actually does a lot of good in Oita. They actually do a lot of local community good. They provide jobs to a lot of people, a lot of students that come out of APU. And they definitely have a place in Pensphere. They introduced these special editions to a lot of fountain pen lovers in the West who couldn't, as you said, rightly so, right? Like they couldn't access these pens, and Wancher was influential in making these available. Actually, they're influential in the limited edition series we have now because they were really one of the first people to do sparkly, right? Like really ultra sparkly, to do color blocking with Purple Rain. So I'm not saying that they're, I'm not saying that they don't fill some kind of a hole or they shouldn't exist. But what I am saying is that, when we buy from Wancher, we really have to do that extra bit of layer of research And yeah, everybody has to choose for themselves.
And they have to listen to you. They have to listen to your podcast, and you'll tell them, where they're going wrong and where they need to get back in line. So that's a good plug for Tokyo Inklings. You need to listen to this podcast.
You heard it here first. You heard it here first.
So I'm really interested in seeing how the pen community will react to your article. If this is something people care about, or if it's too much inside baseball. I can't tell. I don't know.
I think 90% of people won't really care. This is not gonna be, Nixon's Watergate, right?
But it still needs to be done, though, and I think it's not wasted work. It needs to be done because when people do stuff like that, when they do start calling people out when they cross that line, it keeps people in line.
Yeah. And with that, I think we are done. Thank you, everybody, so much for entertaining this podcast. This is episode 60 of Tokyo Inklings. My name is CY. You can find me on my website at Tokyo Station Pens, and that's also where you can find this very spicy article, and you can make your own conclusion from that. You can find me on Instagram and TikTok at Tokyo Station Pens, and you can find me on Twitter at Tokyo Station MNH.
And my name is Jacob. I'm Fudefan on Instagram and on Twitter. I have a blog at fudefan.com.
Thanks for having me. My name is Khuê, and you can find me on Instagram at MidICat.
And I'm Alesa from Inky Rocks on everything.
And our Instagram for this podcast is at Tokyo Inklings on Instagram. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.